This is a read aloud session for BEGE 108, Block 1, Unit 1, the novel, a literary genre. We will be doing a read aloud session for this Unit 1 and we will leave out the exercises which are given in the unit. The structure of the unit is 1.0 Objectives, 1.1 Introduction, 1.2 Defining a novel, 1.3 Origins and Rise of the novel, 1.4 Types of the novel, 1.5 Literary trends in the 18th century England, 1.6 Literary trends in the 19th century England, 1.7 let us sum up, 1.8 Glossary, 1.9 Answer to self-check exercises. We will be leaving out 1.9 because we are not covering up exercises here. 1.0 Objectives. The objective of this unit is to define a novel. We will also trace its origins and look at its development through the last 3 centuries briefly. Once you finish this unit, you should be in a position to define a novel, to trace its origin and development, and to be able to distinguish the different types of novel. 1.0 Introduction. The literary term novel may be applicable to a great variety of prose writing, particularly in this day and age. The novel as genre is not easy to define due to its extremely open and flexible nature. Not only this, the novel also evades definition just as other literary terms that are also very difficult to define. However, since we are going to be talking about the novel and studying various types of novel in this course, we would still need to define the novel. The novel is largely a creation of West, though there have been critics who have tried to locate it in the ancient writings of Egypt and the writings from the Middle Ages in Japan. The truth, however, is that the novel as we know it today emerged in the 18th century in England. Let us now try and work at defining a novel in the next section. 1.2 Defining a novel. Edward Morgan Foster, 1879-1970, in his critical work Aspects of the Novel, published in 1928, states that a novel should have minimum length of about 50,000 words. Anything in prose that is shorter than 50,000 words would be a novella or a short novel. A novel would therefore need to be longer than a long short story. We may also say that a novel should be longer than a folktale, a fable, and a short story. This definition that we have worked out, however, is merely a comprehensive definition of the term novel and would not be applicable to each and every type of novel. A novel has a story to tell, but all stories do not usually develop into novels. The origins of the novel may be traced to the ancient epic and medieval romance tradition. 1.3 The origins and the rise of the novel. Of the two ancestors of the novel, the epic is the ordered form. An epic is a long narrative poem about deeds of brave warriors and heroes who are larger than life. The epic poem has a heroic story to narrate and incorporates within its myth, the legend, folk tales, as well as history. Epic poems deal with the history of a country, a clan. In the Western tradition, there are two types of epics. Number 1, primary. Number 2, secondary. Primary epics, by and large, belong to the oral tradition, whereas the secondary or the literary epics belong to the written form of literature. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, Beowulf, and Gilgamesh are important examples of primary epic, while Virgil's Aeneid, and Milton's Paradise Lost a fine illustration of the literary epic. In India, we have the Ramayana and Mahabharata as well as Kalidasa's Avingan Shakuntalam and Meghdut, which are counted among the classics of the world literatures. The epic tradition has come down to us in a very unique manner. For instance, in the last 100 years or so, the cinema has been favored media for narrative on an epic scale. Novels such as Herman Melville's Moby Dick, 1851, Tolstoy's War and Peace, 1865-72, Anna Karenina, 1875-76, and James Joyce's Finnegan Wake, 1939, have all been made into films. Now, let us look at the second source of the modern novel, the romance. The romance was a literary form that was popular in medieval times. In the 30th century, romance was an in the 30th century, a romance was an adventure short story, usually of love or chivalry, and it was written in verse. It must be remembered that the romance is primarily a European form and about characters that live in courtly world. The word romance itself is suggestive of the elements of fantasy, improbability, and the extravaganza, as well as of love, adventure, and the marvelous, and it was written in verse. However, over time, it came to be written in prose. During medieval times, there were three cycles. A. The Matter of Britain, that dealt with the stories of the legend of the King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. B. The Matter of Rome, that told the stories of Alexander the Great, the Trojan Wars, and the House of Thebes. C. The Matter of France, that narrated the tales of the bravery and chivalry of King Charlemagne and his knights. We have tried to define both the epic and the romance, as there are forefathers of the novel. Interestingly, the novel owes its name to the Italian word novella, meaning a tale or a piece of news. The novel is called roman in the French and is derived from the word romance. But before I conclude, let me tell you that yet another important predecessor of the novel was picaresque narrative that originated in Spain in the 16th century. Most of you may be aware of the novel The History of Tom Jones, the Foundling by Henry Fielding. This 18th century novel is written in picaresque tradition with a picaro or rogue for a hero or protagonist, and the novel deals with his escapades. So essentially, what I'm trying to tell you is that novel had three predecessors: A. The epic, B. The romance, and C. The picaresque narrative. The novel, therefore, may be defined as a long story written and printed in book form and dealing with imaginary people and situation while creating an illusion of reality. The novel was born in the West primarily in the 17th century, but its development took place largely in the 18th century. Critics have tried to trace its origin to ancient Egypt or even medieval Japan, but the novel as genre was a creation of the West. Some critics like Walter Raleigh have even stated that with the works of Richardson and Fielding, the career of the novel may be said to have begun. The English novel Walter Raleigh, page 180. This brings me to the next important point. Why did novel flourish in 18th century England? There were several reasons for that, and let me tell you about them very quickly. The Industrial Revolution had taken place in England and the rest of the Europe. This meant that the people had more leisure that could be dead. I'll repeat it again. The Industrial Revolution had taken place in England and the rest of the Europe. This meant that the people had more leisure that could be dedicated to reading and writing. Moreover, industrialization led to tremendous improvement in printing technology, as a result of which more books, novels could be printed, and that too easily. Then book clubs and circulating libraries were gaining popularity as well. The other important reason for the rise and development of the novel in the 18th century England was the changing socio-political and socio-cultural milieu. The old system of patronage was gradually coming to an end, and the writers did not need to look towards the feudal lords for the patronage. They could now turn to the readers or public for support. The 18th century was the century of the relative peace and prosperity in England, and England emerged as an international power with the strongest navy in the world. An economically powerful and dominant middle class began to emerge along with the steady increase in population. The literacy too saw a sharp rise. Having given the various reasons behind the development of the novel in 18th century England, let me now tell you about the different types of novel that were and are still being written in the next session. 1.4 The types of novel. Critics down the ages have tried to classify novels into various types. If we are to enumerate all types of novel, it may not be useful endeavor, as no rigid classification is possible, as the same novel may belong to more than one type. However, we do not need typologies for the simple reason that they are convenient as they provide. Sorry, I'll repeat it again. However, we do need typologies for the simple reason that they are convenient as they provide us with the convenient labels that help us in knowing what to anticipate in a particular novel. Thus, in this section, we try and give some shape to a variety of novels by classifying them on the basis of 1. The extra-disciplinary field they are close to, such as sociological novels, psychological novels, political novels, historical novels, religious novels, and science fiction. 2. Their subject matter, such as utopian novels, crime novels, detective fiction, and Bildungsroman. 3. Their literary style, structure, technique, such as epistolary novels, realistic novels, naturalistic novels, stream of consciousness novels, psychological novels, or the novel of character. 4. The particular emotion that they evoke, such as romantic novels, sentimental novels, or the escape novels. 5. The particular class interest that they evoke, such as bourgeois novels or the proletarian novels. 6. The geographical areas that they highlight, such as Western, local color novels, or the novels of the soil. 7. The geographical areas from which the novelists hail, such as Indo-Anglian novels, Commonwealth novels, and the African novels. Apart from this, there are other classifications as well. Let me begin by telling you about the novel of incident. A good illustration of this type of novel are the novels of the Daniel Defoe. Novels such as Robinson Crusoe and Moll Flanders. Both these novels are of picaresque narrative, as the structure of these novels is episodic rather than organized plot form. And both the novels also have a very convincing central protagonist. The next type under discussion is the novel of character. that may also be known as psychological novel. The focus in such a novel is the protagonist's motive on what she or he does or how she or he will turn out as a person. A good example is Samuel Richardson's Pamela or Virtue Rewarded. Pamela may also be considered as an epistolary novel in which the narrative is communicated to us through letters. This type of novel is also to be found in more recent times, such as in Alice Walker's The Color Purple. Then we also have the realistic novel, that is characterized by largely that is characterized largely by its fictional effect of realism. In such novels, the characters are often complex and they operate within the developed social structures while interacting with a large number of characters. The exponents of such realistic novels were Defoe, Fielding, Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James, amongst others. From the writings of the people such as Jane Austen emerges the novel of manners, or a novel that focuses on customs, conversation, and ways of thinking and valuing of particular social class. The Bildungsroman or Erziehungsroman, meaning the novel of formation or novel of education. M.H. Abrahams, page 193. The main theme of such type of novel is the development of the main characters, the protagonist's mind, and the character through the narrative. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre and George Eliot's The Mill on the Floss, 1860, are examples of such type of novels. Then there are other novels such as Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, or more recently's John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. These are examples of social novel. If we have read either of these novels, we will find that such novels are influenced by the prevailing socio-economical conditions of the age in which these novels were written. Sir Walter Scott's, such as Ivanhoe, and Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, are examples of historical novel. As is the obvious form of the term historical novel, these novels deal with not only characters but also the socio-political settings of the real historical age. There are many different types of novels. For instance, documentary fiction, non-fiction novel, regional novel, involuted novel, anti-novel, nouveau roman, that is the new novel, magic realism, metafiction, and fabulation, to name just a few. But for our purpose, the type we have dealt with in some detail are sufficient. In the next section, we shall look at the literary trends in the 18th century England. 1.5 Literary trends in the 18th century England. 18th century England was the age of the transition, as Edward Albert puts it in his History of English Literature. This was the age when two distinct strands of influence were at work simultaneously. The first of these twin strands was the adherence, the allegiance, or even denying the older order of classicism. The second strand was the Romanticism. Romanticism meant a return of real nature and a new look at humans' position and role in the midst of the natural world. It also meant a new way of looking at the poor and the oppressed and the drastic change in diction. Writers were now aiming for simplicity and sincerity in their words. They were returning to the legends and the myths of the old for their inspiration. With such a trend in place, it became important for writers to revive ancient literary forms such as ballad, and as yet there was also a general sense of inquiry and keen interest that began to create an entirely new spirit of thinking. Writers also began turning to the history for their stories, and in general, there was sympathy and freshness in the writings of the period. 1.5.1 Prominent novelist of the age Samuel Richardson, 1689 1761, is one of the prominent novelists of this period. He was over 50 when Pamela, A Virtue Rewarded was published in 1740. This novel is in the form of a series of letters and epistolary novel. His next major novel was Clarissa Harlowe, 1747-48. Henry Fielding, 1707-54. His novel Joseph Andrews appeared in 1742. Fielding does away with the epistolary novel and creates a new and powerful novel that carries the reader away with his broad and vivacious humor. The genial and the half contemptuous insight into human nature. Edward Albert, page 258. His greatest novel, however, was Tom Jones. Realism is the hallmark of Fielding's novel. The other prominent novelists of the age were Tobias Smollett, The Adventures of Roderick Random, B. Lawrence Sterne, The Life and the Opinions of Tristram Shandy Jant, 1760, C. Horace Walpole, The Castle of Otranto, 1764. 1.6 Literary trends in the 19th century England. This period saw the actual flowering of Romanticism in all its abundance. As far as the novel was concerned, the historical and domestic novels were established very firmly by Sir Walter Scott and Jane Austen. It was, however, a more fruitful period for poetry and produced great poets such as William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and Lord Byron. Prominent novelist of the age Sir Walter Scott, Guy Mannering, The Heart of Middleton, Jane Austen, The Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, C. Will Makepeace Thackeray, Vanity Fair, The History of Henry Esmond, Charles Dickens, Sketches by Boz, A Tale of Two Cities, George Eliot, Adam Bede, Middlemarch, A Study of Provincial Life, F. Thomas Hardy, Desperate Remedies, Far from the Madding Crowd. 1.7 Let us sum up. In this unit, we have defined a novel as genre, looked at its origin of the novel and its rise as literary genre in 18th century England. We have also defined the different types of novel and summarized the chief literary trends of the 18th and 19th century England. Apart from that, we have mentioned the prominent novelists of both the ages. Having read this unit carefully, we expect you to be able to define a novel. to be able to recognize the novel as genre and to be able to identify various types of novel. 1.8 Glossary. Alexander the Great, 336 to 323 BC. Alexander the Great was an ancient Greek king of Macedonia. He was one of the most successful military commanders in the history and was undefeated in the battle. By the time of his death, he had conquered most of the world known to the ancient Greeks and has traveled as far as India, particularly the Indus area. His exploits are the stuff of legends and folklore and subject of many romances. Charles Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, or Charles I of France, and the Holy Roman Empire, was the king of Franks from 768 to his death. His rule is also associated with the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of art, religion, and culture through the medium of Catholic Church. His foreign conquest and internal reforms helped define both Western Europe and the Middle Ages. Today, he is not only regarded as the founding father of both French and German monarchies, but as the father of Europe. His empire united most of the Western Europe for the first time since the Romans, and the Carolingian Renaissance encouraged the formation of common European identity. Fable. Fable, a fictitious story meant to teach a moral lesson. The characters in the fables are usually talking animals. Folktale. The large body of oral literature belongs to a tribe or nation or ethnic group. House of Thebes. House of Thebes is a city in Greece situated to the north of the Cytherian range, which divides Boeotia from Attica and on the southern edge of Boeotian plain. It played an important role in the fabric of Greek myth as the site of the stories of Cadmus, Oedipus, Dionysus, and the others. In the ancient times, Thebes was the largest city of the region of Boeotia and was the leader of the Boeotian Confederacy. It was a major revival of ancient Athens and sided with the Persians during the 480 BC invasion of Xerxes. Thebes was a major force in Greek history and was the most dominant state at the time of the Macedonian conquest of Greece. During the Byzantine period, the city was famous for its silks. King Arthur. King Arthur is believed to be a prominent English leader in Britain's legendary history and the hero of the many medieval tales and chronicles. He is said to have taken a mantle of a ruler over Britain and defended his land against Saxon invaders following the withdrawal of Rome. The stories of King Arthur include numerous elements of both the legend as well as folklore tradition. While some historians doubt his very existence, the legend that was to become King Arthur was largely developed as the result of writings of Geoffrey of Monmouth. But it needs to be remembered that there were already a large number of Welsh as well as Breton stories and the poems about King Arthur way before Geoffrey of Monmouth ever wrote his Prophasia Merlini or his Historia Regum Britannia, History of Kings of Britain. Legend. Legend is story handed down for generation among a people and popularly believed to have a historical basis, although not verifiable. All such stories belonging to a particular group of people are also known as legends. Memoir, a biography or biographical sketch, usually one written by someone who knew the subject well. An autobiography, especially one that is objective and anecdotal in emphasis rather than inward and subjective. Medieval, characteristic of or congestive of Middle Ages. Myth, a traditional story of unknown authorship, ostensibly with a historical basis, but securing usually to explain some phenomenon of nature, the origin of man, or the customer, institutions, religious sites, etc., of a people. Narrative, of having a nature of narration in the story form, a story account. Patronage, the function or status of a patron, support, encouragement, sponsorship, etc., given by a patron, goodwill, famous, courtesy, etc., shown to people considered inferior. Condensation, travelogue, a lecture on travels, usually accompanied by the showing of pictures both still and moving or on slides. Next is answer to self check exercises, and we are leaving that. And this concludes our BEGE 108 Block 1 Unit 1, the novel, a literary genre. We will be coming up with new unit soon. Thank you.